Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Nolan Erck, and we're going to be looking at Git and why every ColdFusion developer should be using it, and we'll look at how you can get started and some best practices. So we'll look at what source control is, because Git is source control, and why you shouldn't be using homemade source control. We know the people who make back files and zips their files and all kinds of other things like that, and we're going to explain why that is a bad idea for security and other issues. Then we're going to have a look at what Git is and all the different server and client options and some of the commands and some best practices you can use with Git source control for ColdFusion. So welcome, Nolan.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me.
And for those of you who don't know Nolan, he is the chief ColdFusion guru at South of Sashta Productions, and he is also the world's biggest music collector in the ColdFusion community. I saw a picture of his album collection. It was like out to here with albums. Must be thousands of CDs and even vinyl there. So pretty amazing, just in case you're a musicologist as well. So why don't we just start off with, for the three people in the room or in the listening to this who don't know what source control is. What is it and why should everyone be using it?
So source control it's sort of like a librarian for the source code in your app. When you check a book out at a library, the librarian marks down who has the book, keeps track of who's got each individual book in the library. And source control sort of does the same thing for your web app. You might have a few thousand files making up your web app. And source control will keep track of who's changed which files, what parts of the files they've changed, when they changed them, what the files looked like before each change was added to the system, and so on. Sort of acts like a big librarian for the whole code base. And really, the reason everyone what was your second question? What's the reason everyone should do it?
Yeah, why should everyone listening be using source control?
Well, really, for the short answer is it is a best practice in the industry right now, not just for ColdFusion code, but any source code you write, whether it's JavaScript, COBOL, C++, some proprietary scripting language that only 10 people at your company know how to use, whatever the source code is that you're using, it should be in source control. Really, if nothing else, it acts as another backup for all of the code. So worst case, if your laptop gets thrown under a bus, if your servers crash, something like that happens, and you need to have a backup of source code, source control automatically provides you with that backup. If you make some sort of horrendous change to the code, causing a great big security problem in your app or causing a really bad crash bug, things like that, source control makes it really easy to tell what the code looked like before the last change was implemented into the system. It does it all seamlessly, all built into the system without any extra overhead or work on the part of the developers. And best of all, it does it without anyone making those really annoying .back and .old files that we all have made at some point in our careers. That goes away entirely as well. It just kind of works pretty seamlessly behind whatever IDE you're using and solves several problems for you.
And we'll talk about why it's a bad idea to make backup copies of files as .back or .old later in the episode. But I just want to point out that, it's not just for code files. It could be for graphic that are used in your site, or it could be for scripts you use for deploying your Docker or your server config.
Yeah, it could be used for your Docker scripts and your Vagrant files and things of that nature too. It doesn't have to be the actual source code that builds your web app. If you have other related files that are more for building your application, like if you're a gulp task runner and you've got a gulp script file that has your different gulp watch commands in there, you can store that in source control as well. And yeah, you can use it to store images in your website. It will certainly do that if you have graphics that get added and removed from your website as the site is getting used or as development changes are added to the project. It'll certainly track those for you as well. It doesn't do quite as good of a job tracking binary files like that, like JPEGs and PNGs, as far as changes in the files themselves go. But say you had an instance where maybe, I don't know, 5 of the graphics in your website got accidentally erased and replaced with older, lesser quality graphics. If you want to track when that happened and maybe whose computer was responsible, so you can figure out why that machine is producing worse quality images, then yeah, source control will help you track down that sort of thing too.
And some people even put their documentation into source control.
Yeah, some people do that too.
You know, I've seen that on open source projects where the documentation, or people even write books in source control.
You can pretty much anything that's a plain text file, whether it's HTML or code or a text file or a config file or anything else, anything that's plain text, it's really, really good at monitoring what changes happen to it and helping you use that as a nice storing place to show progress in the project and show how things change over time and whatever. So yeah, a lot of people will use source control not just for the project, but documentation too, and various other related things. Depending on which source control tools you're using and which source control provider you're paying for space on, they do give you some other benefits, like giving you a basically a free or easy to use space to store documentation describing the website and some other related bells and whistles.
Cool. So really use source control on everything. In fact, I wish I could use it on my brain sometimes, because I could go back to the state last Tuesday where I was really productive and just revert to that. Or my office. So I went back to the way it was really tidy and organized last April. You know,
I don't think my office has ever had a state where it was really tidy and organized, but
if you had Git for your papers, maybe it would be.
Exactly, yeah. They need Git for physical papers laying around the office and chores that need to get done around the office as well.
So we mentioned earlier that making backup copies, where you call it back or old, or put the date into the extension instead of CFM, is a really bad idea. And it's not just because it makes a bunch of clutter in your directories, which if you or someone else is maintaining the app in the future, it's bound to cause confusion. I mean, I've seen that numerous times coming into other people's code, and it's like, which file do I need to edit? Which is because sometimes the actual latest version of the file is not the one you think. But what are the other issues with making back or old or copying into new directories?
Well, so yeah, it does do all the things you mentioned, where it adds clutter to the website, and it's hard to tell which file is the most recent, which file was changed. It's hard to tell which file is the most recent backup and which backup came immediately before that, and so on. The other medium-sized concern with those files is it's hard to tell what's different between them. So if I have my .cfm file, and let's say index.cfm just for an example, and then I make an index.old with some changes in it that are not in the .cfm version, then I make an index.back or index.backup. Well, now I have index.old, index.backup, and index.cfm. There's no easy way to tell by looking at those which changes are in the .back version and which changes are in the .old version, why I made the changes from one to the other, and so on. The bigger issue, though, too, is if you leave those files laying around with the non-standard extensions, .back, .old, .mine, whatever you come up with, the server-side source code is still in those files. And this is true whether it's ColdFusion or PHP or .NET or Ruby or any other server-side programming language out there. If you change the file so it has a different extension on it than what your web server expects, so in the case of ColdFusion, change it from .cfm to .back, a hacker can then go to the URL in their browser, and they'll just type in, sitename.com/index.cfm. They can change that .cfm part to .old or .mine or .one, whatever the common things are that developers typically use to rename their backup files. Since that file does not have the correct extension on it, the ColdFusion server is not going to process that file. Instead of it being run through ColdFusion and only the HTML and JavaScript is showing up in the browser, what happens is all of the server-side ColdFusion code shows up in the browser instead, and the hacker now has a really easy way to see actual server-side running code from that web app. Now, sometimes that might be nothing, but sometimes people have usernames and passwords in their source code files, or at the very least, they probably, which is a horrible idea by itself, don't ever do that. But separate from that, You'll have things like database queries in there, and hackers can see the names of tables in your database. They might be able to tell what some of the columns are in your database, how certain tables relate to each other, maybe other pieces of information about how the infrastructure of your website is set up. Basically, a lot of free information can be given to hackers so they can try to bust into your website, all because you have a file on the server with the wrong extension on the end of it, .back or .mine or whatever. So just by making those old backup files, if they accidentally end up on your production web server, boom, you've now opened yourself up to a pretty bad security hole.
That is amazing, and I bet a lot of people listening hadn't realized that. What about if you're, working with a team? Does making copies of the file make that harder if you need to share files for edits with other people? Or?
Yeah, exactly. Like without source control, let's say you and I, Michael, were working on a project together, and I changed the application CFC and I add some new features to it. If we're not using source control, I have to email that file to you. Now, one file itself, not a terribly difficult process. You could download the file and drop it into your project, no big deal. What happens though if I make a change to application CFC and unknown to me, you also made a change to application CFC? Well, now whose file is the point of truth? Did I make the correct change or did you make the correct change? And when I email you a copy of one file, are you going to know that you were changing the same file I changed a minute ago? Are you going to know to diff your copy with my copy, make sure that all the changes are in there? Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes we'll just forget to do those things. And that's just with one file. What if I added a new feature to the app and I had to touch 20 files to make that change happen? Those 20 files might be in 4 or 5 different directories in the app. Now you've got a whole lot of manual work to do to copy and paste these files into different places in the app. And it gets very tedious very quickly.
And error prone.
Yeah, very error prone. Not a great way for anyone to spend their time. Multiply that out by, what if we have a team of 7 developers? I make a change and I email that change out to the 6 other people on the team. Now all 6 of them have to do this really tedious dropping files into different places, 6 more people making the changes. That's 6 more chunks of man hours that we're now paying for. That's just wasted logistics. 6 more possibilities for error-prone things to happen as well. So it's just not a good use of anyone's time. Instead, you can use source control and just say, tell the source control system, I'm making a new feature to the app called whatever your feature is called. I'm making the save user button, work. And then I just check that feature into source control. Literally with the click of a button, all 6 other people on the team can download that change. All the files automatically go into the right spot. There are no .back or .old files that are created. Nobody has to manually copy things from folder to folder. It just works. And best of all, too, if I happen to break something during that change, those files are noted as these are the ones that Nolan changed. These are the lines that he changed. You can get an easy snapshot of what the code looked like before and after I messed with something. Makes it really, really easy to tell, oh, Nolan made the change in such and such file in the app. He accidentally forgot a semicolon at the end of a line and something broke, or whatever the case may be. It tracks all of that stuff for you really easily.
And we'll talk a bit about what you're talking there about is merging changes, and we'll talk more in detail on that later. But I just want to point out, the other developers can choose whether they're going to take your changes now or tomorrow or whenever it's convenient for them based on what they're changing. Because maybe they're not ready to merge in your changes because they haven't been QA'd, or maybe they want them now because they know you just fixed something that's important for what they're working on. So, it leaves you a choice. Because I'm thinking, some people might be thinking that, hey, we can all just work straight on the production server, right? Wouldn't that solve all this problem?
No, that does not solve this problem.
Why wouldn't that be a solution to that?
Oh man, why not to work on the production server? So many, many reasons not to work directly on the production server. I don't even know where to begin with that. There are so many possibilities here. It's the production server. In a development environment, if I write code on my laptop, I am the only user on the laptop. Let's say I'm working on my laptop and the code I'm working on is the delete user functionality. And there's a giant bug in the delete user functionality that lets that code be run by anyone who comes across it. They don't have to log in with admin rights first. They can just find the link and click it. If I'm working on my laptop, I know that I'm the only person using my laptop. There's no way someone else could accidentally run that code. I have my own separate local copy of the app and the database and everything like that. I can test everything here locally. If I'm writing code on the production server, directly, there's a possibility that someone else is going to click that link at the same time. Even if you think, oh, my site doesn't get that much traffic, I only launched my site a couple of days ago, Google hasn't found it yet, nothing is crawling that website looking for links yet, I'm fine. Google crawls things a lot faster than we think they do. And if you don't have your website secure and locked down, it could very well be trying to trace through all of the links and clicking on them and accidentally trigger code you don't want to run. So it's always a good idea just to not change anything on production, change it on your local environment first. In fact, what other people like to do sometimes is not necessarily change code on production, but they'll have sort of a shared development server where maybe the team of 8 developers all write code on the same development ColdFusion server. And even that can be a troublesome situation too that you want to avoid. You might have, if I make a break in the app that downs the entire system so it's not usable, if it's just my laptop, fine, I can't write code until I fix that problem. If we're using a shared database or a shared dev server, then all 7 or 8 other people on the team can't write code either until I fix it. So really it's better just to keep everything as compartmentalized and away from the production server as much as possible. And there are really good tools these days that just make it super easy to protect your production server and only push changes up to it when they're ready to go anyway.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And just to point out to people, even a shared dev server doesn't solve the problem of someone else overwriting your change if you're both editing the same files at the same time. So.
Exactly. And I've seen that happen before at places too, that are not using source control. The only way to solve that problem is using a source control or version control system. They mean the same thing. You just hear people use one term or the other.
All right. Well, I and millions of other people are convinced we should be using source control. Why should we use Git as that source control system?
The short answer is it's just kind of becoming the industry standard tool right now. There are several different options out there. You could use Git, you could use Subversion. Microsoft has one called Team Foundation Server. There are less than, I guess, about a handful of other possibilities out there if you wanted to go through something else as well. The nice thing about Git is it's free. You don't have to actually pay anyone to download a Git client. It works on Windows, Mac, and Linux. There are a variety of tools available for it. So if you're more of a command line person and you like writing command line scripts like node commands and things like that, you can write Git commands in a very similar fashion to manage marking all of your files, checking them in and out of source control, and so on. And if you're like me and you can't stand doing source control from a command line, you prefer to have some sort of GUI tool that looks a lot more like your operating system, views of folders and files within those folders. There are various great tools out there that implement Git source control using that setup as well. The one I personally like a lot is called SourceTree. It's made by Atlassian. The nice thing about SourceTree is it's free. All you have to do is make an Atlassian account, and it works on Windows, Mac, and Linux as well. So you can kind of use it for whatever platform you like. And shameless plug, when I give my talk next week at CF Camp in Germany, I'm going to give my talk on Git source control there, and the tool I'll be using is the Atlassian SourceTree app to show people how they can check files in and out and change them and revert them and all that stuff. We'll use SourceTree for that. That's been my main app for probably at least a year now for doing version control work.
Cool. And you know, you definitely can do Git source control for free. There also are some paid client options or paid server options if you want.
Yeah, you can kind of get as nuts with it as you want to. Like GitHub.com is one of the providers that sells basically space on a server to run your source control setup. They have free accounts for small projects with a few people attached. There are some other companies that do similar things. There's an outfit called Unfuddle.com that does source control for you as well, and they have a free and inexpensive option. Bitbucket is another one that a lot of people like. There are several others out there as well. It really just depends on what your needs are. You can start with a free source control account. In fact, I use free options for a lot of my personal projects. If I'm the only developer, it's just me and my source code. I still want to have source code and source control in place, even though I'm not concerned about another developer accidentally overwriting my code. I'm still concerned about what if my laptop falls off a bridge tomorrow, or I just break something horribly bad in the app. I want to see what the code looked like yesterday. I check everything in the source control.
That happen a lot, Nolan? Your laptop falls off a bridge? I mean, you code while you're walking on a high wire? Or?
Right behind this window, there's a giant jungle of wild monkeys and trapeze. It's like Tarzan out there, just with chaos happening. So, yes, the laptop's constantly falling apart.
Do you work for the federal government or something?
No, I travel a lot as part of my consulting business and speaking at conferences, things of that nature. So I'm always just kind of extra paranoid about something happening to the laptop while I'm on a flight. It gets bumped a little bit too hard, or you know, just something like that happens with it. All the source code is checked into GitHub or whatever the project of the month is. I'm using their source control system. And that way everything is just taken care of, whether it's just me or if it's a bigger team of maybe 3 or 4 developers, we'll use maybe a paid GitHub account, and that lets you have what they call private repositories. So you can have all your code up on the cloud and make it visible to everyone else. If it's maybe an open source app, you might want to do that. Or if it's a private project, like not an open source app, just something you're working on for a client, you can still use the cloud options like GitHub and Unfuddle, and just you pay a little bit more each month, and then the project is marked private, so only people with proper access can log in and see it. And then you can get even more crazy with that. And if you want to, you can run your own Git server. So instead of paying GitHub.com $8 or $10 a month or $40 a month or whatever the amount is for the options you need, you can actually pay for and download a virtual machine that is an exact copy of basically what GitHub.com does, and run that on your own server in your office. I've got one client that does that. The benefit there being, if you have an app that you're just very, very protective of and don't really trust the cloud options in general, nothing against GitHub.com or anyone in particular, but just, I have one client that they just kind of feel uneasy doing that, putting their code out on somebody else's machine, even though it's locked down with HTTPS and usernames and passwords and everything is nice and secure. The idea of putting their source control out on the cloud just kind of worried this one client quite a bit. So instead, he set up a private GitHub server. You can actually pay for their, I think it's called GitHub Enterprise, and you can just run the Git software on your own machine, kind of the end in the hall closet or whatever, if, off of your network. So there really are a bunch of different options depending on what you want to do.
Yeah, I talked with George Murphy a few months ago about GitLab, which has a whole bunch of things tacked on top of GitHub for continuous integration. And I also did an interview with Gust about Bitbucket and options give you different privacy, but they also give you access to different continuous integration or other features tacked on top of Git. So that's another thing to think about there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've picked a Git server and you've picked yourself a Git client. Does everyone on the team have to use the same Git client, or?
They don't have to use the same Git client. So if you have, they do have to use the same Git kind of cloud provider. So everyone on the team will agree to host a project on, Atlassian or Bitbucket rather, or Unfuddle or GitHub. You pick that place to put your code. And then everyone on the team can pick the client that they like themselves. I'm a source tree person. I like Atlassian source tree. I know other developers like doing things from the command line instead, so they can install the Git command line tools and just work that way. For Windows users, there's another option called Tortoise Git. That's another free GUI client for doing Git source control. And people can grab that. And yeah, you can mix and match however you want. Git clients work sort of like FTP clients. I might have 8 people on my team that all have to FTP files up to a server. We all can use whatever FTP client we want because the clients all speak the same protocol. They all use the FTP protocol to send files to and from whatever that server is. And the same is true with Git and Git clients and the server. Git clients is just the client like your FTP client, and Git is the protocol that those clients speak when they talk to the server to send files back and forth, just like FTP is the protocol that FTP clients use.
So if you're using source tree for this, how long does it take to get up to speed on using it to control Git? Is it like 5 minutes or is it 5 hours? Or?
If you've never done source control before at all, I would say it might take you an hour or two to get the tools installed and just sort of, I would make like a little hello world project, make an empty folder or make an empty project, call it my, hello world. I'm a big music person, as we mentioned earlier. I might make a little test app with just 3 or 4 HTML pages in it that list out maybe the last 5 concerts I went to or the last 5 records I bought, something like that. Something really easy that you don't really care about as far as, you know, an app for one of your clients. But it's real source code, the real HTML files and so on. So things that you can check into a source control project like GitHub. You can make changes to it and see how the files work back and forth. I would set something up like that and just try out a few different basic options. Make a change to the file and commit the change. Can you tell on github.com if your file changed correctly or not? Undo that change, revert the change back, and see if you can tell what the file looked like yesterday or an hour ago or whenever it was that you made the edits to the code. And doing that, I'd say I would usually budget like an hour or two to go from 0 up to at least kind of the basics of, okay, I can check files in and I can pull down changes from some other laptop or some other developer on the team. And I think that's actually a pretty good starting point for at least just using source control as a better than nothing, now I'm protected kind of option. You can get more involved from there and set up what they call branches and set up what they call the Git flow model and do a whole variety of other things, some of which are super useful, some of which you just don't use all that often. It kind of depends on what your needs are as a team. But yeah, I would start with that, block off an hour or two, install the client, make your Git account on github.com or Unfuddle or whatever your server of choice is, and then make some little tiny, set of web pages that, I don't know, pictures of your dog or the last, the last recipe you cooked in the kitchen or whatever, just something so you can kind of see the changes real easily and make sure that it works. And once you're comfortable with that, then check in code from a real project and see if that goes the same way. The nice thing about source control too is, let's say you start with a real project, you get to the point where you think, okay, I'm comfortable, my little app showing off the last 5 chocolate cakes I baked, that worked correctly. Now I'm going to put a real client's app into source control. Once everything is in source control and being monitored by GitHub or Unfuddle or whatever, it's pretty hard to physically delete a file from the app to the point where it's not recoverable. You can actually mark things. It takes a lot of work to go in and say, yes, I really, really do want to destroy this file, never have it return again. Typically, if you put everything in GitHub, if I accidentally deleted 10 files off my hard drive at that point, it's one click of a button to bring those files back. So, so people should not be too scared to start using Git source control. It's pretty easy to start using. It's really, really hard to screw yourself up so bad that you can't recover from it later on.
So we'll talk about some more resources for learning Git later, and we'll put those in the show notes for the episode too, okay, along with the other things we mentioned. But you mentioned Git and GitHub there, and I think a lot of people get confused between the two. So can you just clarify?
I think they do, you're right. Sure. So when we talked about the Git clients like Tortoise Git and SourceTree, we mentioned Git is the protocol, sort of like FTP is the protocol that an FTP client uses. FTP is just the way that those apps send messages back and forth between the FTP client and the server. Git is the protocol that the clients use to send information up to the server. GitHub.com is one of those servers that you can rent space on to host all of your projects. It's not the protocol itself. That's always called Git. GitHub is just one of the providers out in the internet that you can set up an account on and move things around from there. So yeah, people will, because Git and GitHub are sort of very similarly named, people will often be lazy and say one name when they mean the other. Like, oh, I put this on Git. Well, you didn't technically put your project on Git. You put your project on GitHub, and you used the Git protocol to send those files up to GitHub.com. You don't have to use GitHub.com for Git source control. It's a very popular option, but it is not the only option for this. I have several clients that like using the Atlassian tool called Bitbucket, and that does the same thing. I've also had a lot of success using Unfuddle.com, which is another provider that rents space for Git projects on their server. There are a couple of other options out there as well.
And I'm kind of curious, where does the name Git come from? Does it mean something, or do you happen to know where it came from?
You know, I don't know what the name means, if it's an acronym for something off the top of my head. It was invented by the same guy that invented Linux. And all those Unix guys tend to like naming their tools some sort of little joke, like
yes,
Elm and Pine. Like Elm was the electronic mail reader, and Pine came out, and Pine stood for Pine is no longer Elm. So it wouldn't surprise me if Git has some nerdy story behind it as to why it's called that as well. I've never bothered looking that up, to be honest.
Yeah, just curious. I wondered if it was a corruption of getting, but
it makes sense. I kind of thought that myself. I just don't know for sure if that's what it meant, or if there's also some sort of second joke nerd meaning in it.
Well, if anyone listening knows, or maybe someone listening actually created the name Git, then let us know in the comments.
Yeah, let us know.
So you've got Git, you've played around with a bit. What are some common commands that people might be using?
So to start, what you would do is, when you first have your project with your HTML or whatever source code files, you make what they call a repository in GitHub, and that's basically the project space or project name where you're going to host all of your source code files. So I run South of Shasta Consulting. I have, let's say I have maybe like a client database app of some sort for that. So, or no, just southofshasta.com. We'll keep it easy. So I have southofshasta.com as my website. I probably have a handful of web, HTML files and such that power southofshasta.com. I would make a repository or repo in GitHub called something along the lines of South of Shasta or South of Shasta website, something like that, so I can tell by looking at it what the project is. So I'd start by creating a repo, and then check all the files in. I would, probably on the github.com website, you could do some sort of upload. You can just upload the files up there. The actual process of getting the files into your site for the first time varies a little bit from client to client. There are commands you can type at the command line to check in a bunch of files. You can also use tools like Atlassian SourceTree to just say, this is where all my code is, I'm going to upload it there. So that process varies a little bit from app to app. We could probably do a separate podcast or YouTube tutorial on how to start that at a separate time, because that itself could be its own topic. Once you get your files in to your project, typically what you'd start with is, if you want to add a new file to your app, you would just do a git add, where you add a new file to the app. So if my website has 5 web pages right now, and I added a 6th web page, you would do a git add to put that 6th file into the project, until that basically tells GitHub, or Git, or rather, hey, I've added a new file. I would like you to start monitoring this file for changes and keep track of who changed it, when, and what lines they've changed. So you do a combination of git add and git commit, and that basically is where you add the file to the system, and then when you commit a file, that's where you tell Git, I've made some changes to this file. Please make a snapshot of what it looked like before and what it looks like now, so that you can tell the difference in them and mark timestamps on who changed what and when, and what the files looked like before, and all the deltas of what the file.
Yeah, because the Git server isn't storing a copy of every version of the file. It's smart. It only stores the edits you'd have to make to get to the current version.
It does, yeah. It stores, when you make your project on your laptop, so in the case of the South of Shasta website example that I gave a minute ago, if you look in that folder where all of your .cfm or .html files are, there's a hidden folder in there called .git. And inside that folder is a whole bunch of basically Git metadata that the Git app is using to track all those changes to your files, which files were changed, who changed them and when, and so on. And you're right, it does not keep an exact copy of every change to every file. It's smart enough to know how to not do that. It just keeps track of changes between the deltas between the change I made now versus the change I made an hour ago or yesterday or whatever it is that I'm telling Git to mark everything with.
And then if you want to get an older version back, it'll undo all those changes to regurgitate back the older version if you happen to need it.
Exactly. And that .git folder, and the fact that it's changing that it's storing just the deltas and not storing actual copies of every change to every file, really, as day-to-day users of Git, you never have to worry about any of that. The only thing that the only part of it that really matters to a day-to-day user of Git is if you're used to using an older tool like Subversion. Subversion also had a folder where it kept track of all the changes to your app, but because some of those older tools like Subversion did not keep track of just the deltas. They kept track of entire copies of files as they were changed. Storing your app with Subversion on your hard drive took up a whole bunch of space. And storing the same app with Git version control takes up less drive space because it's only storing those deltas. It's not storing the entire copies of every file on the app. I saw a lot of Git presentations when Git was first sort of ramping up in popularity. And one of the things that really bothered me as a developer was how much time the presenters were all spending talking about Git is so great because it only stores the deltas. Let's look really, really in depth at all the different nuances of what goes inside that .git folder and how Git stores things differently internally than Subversion stored them. And I left 3 or 4 of those presentations thinking, you know what, I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm never going to have to go into that folder to make changes. Or if I am, it's going to be very, very much the exception to the rule. I just want to know how to use Git. Why is it better than Subversion on a day-to-day usage basis? How do I make this part of my workflow, and how am I going to be more productive with it? So that's actually why I came up with the presentation I'm giving at CF Camp next week, because I saw so many talks that just buried themselves in those little deltas of like, oh, here's what happens inside the Git folder and how it stores the deltas, and here's how you change those files using Git commands from the command line. And I left that and I thought, you know, we're at a spot in the web where there are so many people currently that are writing code, but they used to spend a lot of their time in Photoshop and Dreamweaver and tools like that. And stereotyping a little bit, a lot of those people are not command line people. They're visual people. They come from visual tools like Photoshop and Fireworks. They want to use a visual tool to mark files as checked into Git and mark files as I want to revert that file back and make it look like it did yesterday and so on. So that's where the idea for this presentation came from.
Okay, so you've added files to your server, you've committed your latest changes. What do you do now if you want to share that with the rest of the team?
Once your files are in github.com, you're good. If let's say you and I, Michael, were working on a project together and I made a bunch of changes, checked it into github.com, I wanted you to be able to look at that code and maybe add your contributions to it. All we have to do is, assuming we both have accounts on github.com, I just add you as a collaborator on that project, and then you can check the code out, make copies of it on your machine. And then we'll keep track of changes you make, changes I make, and it will merge all of those things together as we're moving forward in our application.
Okay, so once you've pushed the changes to the server, other people have access to those changed versions of the files.
Basically, yeah.
Now, you talked earlier about branching. Tell us a bit more about that.
So branching, what that lets you do is, well, let me back up for a minute. One of the reasons people would often make .back and .old files is they were about to make a really big change to a web app, and just in case they broke something, they wanted to have a copy of what the code looked like before this big change. So let's say I'm working on a new feature to an app. I have a website that does, well, we'll use our music example again. Maybe I have a website that keeps track of my CD and vinyl collection. And I'm adding some new really big feature to that app, some sort of search engine or whatever. I'm updating the new version of Bootstrap there. That's a realistic thing. So we're on Bootstrap 2 right now, and I'm moving the website to Bootstrap 4. That requires adding several .css files, adding some new JavaScript files into the system that were not there before, swapping out some of the div classes that I had previously, putting in new div classes. I might end up touching 2 or 3 dozen files to implement this new Bootstrap 4 functionality in the website. Let's say it takes 100 files total just to come up with a nice round number. I could go into each one of those 100 files and make .back or .old copies of every single one of them. That would be really tedious and really boring. No one wins by doing that. Instead, what you can do in Git is you can do what they call a feature branch. And basically you tell Git, I'm about to add a new feature to this app. Git will then, it'll mark what the code looks like right now, and it will sort of make a little offshoot copy, if you will, of the code, so it knows, okay, Nolan made this code change on Friday. We're going to mark what the code looked like before that, and we'll just leave that original copy. We'll call that master. That's the master copy of what it looked like before Nolan implemented Bootstrap 4. And then I can have this own little feature called Bootstrap 4 implementation or something to that effect, make all of my changes in there, add the new files, delete other old files, update the CSS, update the div tags, whatever it is I'm doing. And the master copy of the code does not get changed. Git is smart enough to tell the difference in, here's the master copy of what the code looked like before, and over here off to the side is the Bootstrap 4 implementation that Nolan is working on separately. And by using branches, what Git will let me do is sort of flip between seeing what the site looked like with the old code and with the new code, literally by clicking a button in my source tree app. I don't have to undo .back and .old files. I don't have to rename things from one side to the other. I don't have to copy a folder from one spot to another. I click a button and it just says, show me what the site looked like in the snapshot of what master code looks like. Show me what the site looks like with a copy of this Bootstrap 4 version of the code that I'm working on. And Git can sort of just snap between the two very, very easily as you click that button. And that's what features let you do. So if we had 8 developers on a team, maybe each of us are working on our own feature. I'm working on the Bootstrap 4 implementation. Maybe you're working on something to do with adding a chat app into the website. Well, my Bootstrap 4 stuff doesn't touch your chat code, and vice versa. We've got 6 other people working on optimizing database queries and a better security system and whatever else. If I break the code in the feature I'm working on, it should not affect you, nor should it affect any of the other developers. And if we each have our own branch, Git will basically make 6 little copies of the code, one for each of us to play with separately, so that our changes don't accidentally break the other person's code in the system. And then what that lets you do is, let's say all 6 of us have features we're working on. As those 6 features get approved by QA, we can one by one move them back into that master original copy of the code. And again, no physically copying of files, no moving .old files back to .cfm files or anything like that. To make my Bootstrap 4 feature part of the master code base, all you do is you click a button that says merge this branch into the master branch, and Git will just say, okay, those files are now part of this master copy here. Maybe the next day when you're done with your chat app, your chat feature, you just click on the chat branch that you created and it will merge those down into the master branch as well too. And then as each of us developers adds a new feature to the app, those things will one by one get merged into master, and the site automatically has those new features in it. It's ready to go. That's kind of what branches lets you do.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And, you know, just so we're clear here, even though you've got all these 6 developers or however many are on your team, all working on their own branch or branches, and you can have more than one branch going yourself, right?
You can have, exactly.
Several features. But also there's the main branch that corresponds to the production server. And if there was a bug found in production while you're working on your branch, you could stop working on the branch, flip over to look at the master copy, fix that bug, and get it QA'd, and then put back into production. Meanwhile, it hasn't messed up the code you're currently working on in that Bootstrap feature that you're working on.
Exactly. And you don't have to go down that road when you first start using Git. If that all seems kind of overwhelming to people that are new to source control, you don't have to do any of those things to start. I would say by default, when you first check your code into GitHub, it makes a branch for you just to put all the code in there. And by default, that branch is called master. That's the master copy of your code. The long-term best practice that everyone uses these days is the master branch should always match whatever's on your production web server. So if my master branch has 10 files in it, the production web server that's running right now, www.sitename.com, that's going to have those same 10 files in it. They look exactly the same as whatever's in master. And for some people with maybe small websites or small dev teams, that's not a bad spot to start using Git. You can actually start with that, check your files into Git. When you're ready to move those files up to your production server, use some sort of tool or code or script to take files out of your master branch in GitHub and send them over to your production web server. And there are a dozen or so different ways to do that we could talk about sometime too. Yeah, you can start.
Well, and that's what we talked about on some of the other podcast episodes that I'm going to put in the show notes about Bitbucket pipelines or GitLab's whole continuous integration stuff. There'll that you can get that all automated. Where
Yeah, exactly.
Push it up, and if you have a cluster of production servers, it could be sending it, the exact same code to all the servers automatically, so they don't get out of sync.
Exactly. Yep. And none of that is a manual process. You can literally have that all happen just as soon as somebody changes a file in GitHub. You can start with that if that's, and I often will tell people just start doing that as their beginning place to get kind of comfortable with Git and get used to the workflow of checking a file in and out and using this as the system to send files to other developers rather than emailing files back and forth. Once you're done with that and everything kind of is comfortable and you feel like, okay, I understand how to check files in and out, this makes sense, I know how to revert a file back if I mess something up and I want to see what the file looked like yesterday, then you can go on from there and maybe make feature branches for whatever the different things are you're playing with on your app. And yeah, as you mentioned, if I have 6 people on the team, that doesn't mean I can only have 6 branches. Just myself, I might have 20 different features I'm working on. I could make 20 different branches or even 100 different branches. There's no limit to how many branches you can make. There's no rule that says if I make a branch and put code in it, I have to merge that code back into master. You can make a branch, try out a few things, decide that that code is terrible, and just delete the branch. And Git will delete that code. None of it gets accidentally moved to your production server. How many times have we done that where you made a change to something, tried out a little hello world example of some new jQuery plugin or some new whatever thing you were working on and forgot to undo all of that entirely before pushing a change up to your production server, and then, oh man, look at that, that fake save button I thought I was just making on my laptop is now on the production box. I've got to undo that really quickly before customers see it and break something. So you can protect yourself against all of that using branches and stuff once you're comfortable with the basics of Git and checking things in and out. You can check that out. And once branches are comfortable for people, there's a recommended sort of day-to-day usage of Git called Git flow. And Git flow it's really just a technique. It's the idea that your master branch matches what's in production. And then if I have a team of developers all working on maybe version 1 of our apps on production right now, we're working on writing version 2 due to ship later this year. We'll have a second branch called develop, where all the developers keep putting their day-to-day changes into the develop branch as it goes forward in time. And separate from that, I might have feature branches to break out some of the bigger chunks of stuff going into develop into their own sections. There's also the concern of what do I do if version 1 that's currently in production has a big security hole and I have to jump into version 1 really quick, apply a patch to that to fix the production server, but I want that fix also to get copied into the version 2 stuff that we have, the develop branch and the other features I've made off of version 2, so that we don't forget that security hole fix that we made later on. That can get kind of crazy to keep track of it all in your head, and you can think of like, oh man, I've got a master branch and now a develop branch, and I've got feature branches off of develop, and I've got these hot fixes on production, but I want to make sure the hot fixes also get into develop, and it can kind of become a big weird spider web of where do these files all go? There was a really smart person on the web that came up with this idea called Git flow, where they basically broke that down into a great big idiot-proof infographic of where all those branches go and how they work together. And if that weren't enough, the nice people over at Atlassian SourceTree actually added a Git flow button right into their app. So you can actually tell SourceTree, I want to use this Git flow style of working where I have a master branch, a develop branch, all my feature branches are off of develop. I've got these hot fixes that need to come off of master and back in there, but they also need to get copied into develop and so on. Rather than doing that all manually and very likely breaking it or doing something wrong, which I definitely would do, you can just literally click a button in SourceTree and say, please do the Git flow stuff for me. And it goes, okay. And then anytime I make a feature or a hotfix, Git flow and SourceTree is smart enough to know which files get copied where, and it marks everything accordingly how it's supposed to. And I literally don't have to do anything other than click a button. So, but that's I wouldn't say start with that. That's the best practice way that's very popular now. But if you're brand new to source control, if you're still kind of freaked out at the idea of features and branches, start with something simple and just get to that point whenever you're not feeling overwhelmed by it, when you're kind of comfortable with using Git, and then kind of add features in from there as you need to.
And so is that how you label a version release? Like if you have a version 1.0 or 1.1 and you want to label all the files that are in version 1.0 and separately label a different version, because maybe you have customers who are running multiple, different versions of your code on their own server. Is that how you label files as being in a version in Git? Or?
You could label it by branches. You could make a branch called version 1 and a branch called version 1.1 and so on. There's also a feature in Git called tagging, where you can sort of just apply a label, like maybe version 2 of our app takes 6 months to build. We're constantly checking code into the version 2 branch. Over the course of 6 months, we might check code in there 1,000 times. So there are 1,000 different snapshots of what version 2 looked like at any point in time while we were developing it. And so let's say right now at my clock, it's Thursday night at 8 p.m. Maybe that's when QA finally says, yes, the copy of version 2 code that's currently in GitHub, that's the one that's ready to go. There are no bugs in that one. That's what we want to mark as our gold copy for version 2 and ship that off to production. You can slap a label on that particular Thursday at 8 p.m. copy of the version 2 code called tag, and it will just literally put a little virtual post-it note on that part of the code and says, okay, that one right there, that's the one that we're marking as the official version 2 copy of the code. And there are different features you can implement with tags if you want to get a little bit crazy with that. I have one client that they have other continuous integration tools that are implemented so that when code gets tagged a certain way, it fires off other processes to make sure that the servers are reset or that fresh copies of the code are downloaded, or if they're using a thing called Docker, it sort of rebuilds the Docker instances. And so you can use tags to get other very fancy functionality to work. You can also just use it as a way to sort of put a little highlighter across one version of your source code base and mark it as something you want to reference later.
Now, I don't know if you've ever had a customer like this, but sometimes I've had people who say, hey, can you get back the version we had last week?
Oh yeah, I have people say that. Can you roll it back to what the code looked like last week? Being a consultant, I also have the situation happen where clients will sometimes call up and say, hey, our site was working fine yesterday and today it's broken. What did you change, Nolan? And they immediately think my team edited something. So what I often need is a neutral third-party reporting system of some kind that will show who changed all the code, when they changed it, and what exactly was changed. And using a tool like GitHub will give you that automatically as just part of having it in place. You get that reporting there. And a nice other side effect, as you mentioned, of that reporting is you can do what they call revert changes. So if I mark my files every hour or so, it's Thursday at about 8 o'clock right now. If I broke something in the last 3 hours, I want to see what the website looked like 3 hours ago. I can just go through that Git reporting system, find the copy of the code I checked in at around 5 p.m. and I can say, you know what, make all my files look like this copy of the code base, please. And Git will go through and it will actually undo my changes from the last 3 hours and set everything back to what it looked like at 5 p.m. And it takes one click.
It's a lifesaver.
It's a big lifesaver, yeah. It's fortunately I don't have to use it too often, but when you have to use it, man, it's really, really nice to have that there.
And then, of course, if the client 5 minutes later says, oh, no, I've changed my mind again.
Yeah, you can just move it back to, flip it back to the other one, or any of the steps in between. If I change my code 100 times today, as long as I click the commit my changes button at each one of those 100 changes, I can move my code to any of those particular points in time. So we keep talking about how Git monitors your changes. One thing I guess I should point out is if I'm typing a bunch of lines of code in my editor and I hit save, say I'm in Sublime Text, I hit save, that by itself does not actually mark the code as checked into source control. I have to actually do something in source tree or at the command line or whatever the Git tool is I'm using to say, okay, what the code looks like right now, I'd like you to make a copy of that, please, and reference it, or I'd like you to commit that change to Git, save it for later reference if need be. So if I added 100 lines of code and then I do a Git commit, all 100 of those lines are added to source control in one sort of snapshot. I can see what the site looked like before those 100 lines were added, or after those 100 lines are added, but not after just 17 of those lines were added or something like that. If I want to see basically anywhere that I would, if I were doing this the old way and making .old and .back files, anywhere that I would feel that urge to make a .back file, that's where you want to do the git commit command, and that'll actually save that snapshot of what the code looks like for you.
And do any of these tools have something that will just scan your directories and tell you, look, here are the files you've changed since it was last committed?
They do,
here
yeah.
Are the files here are the things you've added into your directories that you might want to add.
They have, they do. They have different tools, have different ways of doing that. The Git command line tool basically has a command line text base output. It will show you the files that are new or that have changed since that last git commit. In the case of TortoiseGit, that basically works on top of the Windows File Explorer. So in Windows, you have those nice little yellow gold icons for all of your folders. If you use TortoiseGit on top of those folder icons, you'll have little green check marks that show up saying Git has checked all of these files into the system correctly. If there's a file in that folder that has been changed and Git does not have a copy of the latest code checked in for safekeeping, that green check mark will change to, I think it's a red X or an exclamation point. It's been a little while since I've used that tool. And then SourceTree SourceTree is its own standalone app. It doesn't use the command line. It doesn't use the Windows File Explorer. It has its own GUI that it uses. And inside that GUI, it will basically give you a list of files that have changed and what they call unstaged files or uncommitted files. And those are things that Git saw you've changed or added to the system, but it's not currently marking those for safekeeping and keeping snapshots of them. So yeah, they'll all show you some variation of, hey, you forgot about these changes over here. You might want to add those to Git.
Now, that sounds really useful because there's no way I'm going to remember all the files that I've changed or added. It's easy to forget them. So that's wonderful. Now, if you're merging with other teammates, I could easily imagine, if all things go good, you change, lines 10 through 12, and your teammate changed lines, 100 through 110, and it's easy to merge that, right?
Right.
Automatically, and Git does that. But what happens if they've edited the same lines you've edited?
So that's called a merge.
Suppose they even deleted your whole chunk of code.
Yeah, and that could happen too. Well, if they delete your whole chunk of code, you have that nice Git login system to tell who it was that deleted your chunk of code, and you can go yell at them. I'm just kidding. Yeah,
maybe they deleted it for a reason. Maybe they were fixing a bug and that code became irrelevant.
Sure, that we can. Yeah, you can have that happen too. In the case of where we have code that's not being deleted, but let's say I changed lines 1 through 10, and you also changed lines 1 through 10 in that same file, that would cause a merge conflict. That's where we both try to check in changes to the same line of code, and Git cannot tell whose line of code is supposed to be the proper one to keep track of. In that case, you have what they call a merge conflict. And basically then you have to pull up both copies of the source code file and compare those changes line by line and figure out which one is the correct copy you want to keep, and do what they call resolve the merge conflict. Depending on which tool you're using, there are a couple of different ways to do that. My preference is using Atlassian SourceTree. It's a nice, very visual-based tool. It's got a file diffing tool baked into it. So if we did have a merge conflict on index.cfm, for example, SourceTree will pull up my copy and your copy of that file. It will highlight the chunks of the file that are that have changed, and then I can sort of eyeball them one by one and tell, oh, okay, Michael's version is correct, check his in instead of mine, or maybe you and I both made 2 changes to that same file. Maybe one of mine is correct, but one of yours is correct. I can tell SourceTree, oh, the top change in my file, skip that, use Michael's instead, but the bottom change, use mine and Michael's is out of date, and it will actually merge those 2 things together, combining, making a kind of a hybrid of my changes and your changes, and then you can check that into SourceTree for safekeeping as well. So that can get a little annoying, to be honest, dealing with merge conflicts. The couple of things you can do to sort of avoid having to do that. One is if everyone is working on their own branches, you have less of this issue. It doesn't go away entirely, but it goes away some. The reason being, if I'm in my own branch, say I have a Nolan feature branch and you have a Michael feature branch, we're not technically changing the same code. We're changing code in our own branches, which is sort of like having your own personal copy of the code. So it won't affect our day-to-day work as much. When we go to, if we're working in the same branch and we're trying to move forward there, and we have, you want to avoid merge conflicts that way, the little catchphrase that people say a lot is commit early, commit often, meaning whenever you get to a good stopping point, wherever you would hit Control S or Command S in your editor to save a file, commit it to Git. That way it'll just mark your changes back in the system very quickly. And if everyone follows that commit early, commit often methodology, the odds of my copy of the code being drastically out of date from someone else's copy of the code goes down quite a bit. So there's much less chance for merge conflicts. It's a little bit easier to move forward on a day-to-day basis like that.
Can you even have your text editor automatically commit every time you hit save? Or?
Yeah, some editors can do that too. There are different plugins for Dreamweaver and Sublime and different tools like that so that they will do the Git commits behind the scenes for you. I personally don't do that. I've always had config issues when I've tried to get my IDE editor to do the source control work at the same time as well. I've never found a tool that worked really well that way. The tools I tried several years ago, they were just kind of unstable and they would forget files or just have different problems pop up. And when I first started using source control, the first system I used was a tool called Visual Source Safe. It was sort of a thing that predates Git.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was an old Microsoft tool. And that one, it was its own standalone app that you had to tab over to that app and click on the buttons in there. It wasn't an integrated thing into your IDE. So I sort of started with the mindset of source control is done in its own separate app. I have to go alt-tab over to that app and do my check-in, check-out process there and then go back to my editor. And I just never kind of completely got out of the habit of doing that. So I just always use my own separate app. But yeah, if people don't want to do that, there are plugins for all of your favorite IDEs out there that'll take care of some of this for you.
I even remember Polycon CVS, which was a thing that came out in the 80s for doing source control.
Oh, nice.
I guess it's the same as CVS source control or merged into it.
Okay.
Anyway, you've merged changes, but do you stick them straight into the master or do you put them somewhere else for QA?
It would probably depend on the project and who I'm working on it, to be perfectly honest with you. The textbook answer is no, you probably have some sort of QA or testing branch that you can sort of dump everything into for the QA team to check it out first. And then they can look at all the features you're working on before they go ready to go live. Again, if you're just starting out with QA, that might be a little more of a headache than people want to do, to be, that's not the textbook answer that people would recommend giving on Stack Overflow. But in a real world situation, if I had a brand new team that wasn't quite sure how to use source control yet, I might tell them to start with just check it into master and let QA check everything in the master branch. Once it's ready to go, then log onto your production server and pull the latest copies down from master and they'll all be live on your production server. Again, the better kind of recommended practice though is don't do that. Make some sort of QA branch and let everything go into the QA branch first. And once the QA team gives it its blessing and says, yes, this code is all ready to go, then you would kind of merge those changes over into master and launch them on production that way. But I have done it both the textbook way and with different kind of shortcuts depending on the client and the needs of the day.
Cool. This is more about Git.
I'm sorry, you cut out there. Can you repeat that, Michael?
Someone wants to learn more about Git. Where would you suggest they go?
They should go to my talk at CF Camp. There's a...
Of course.
Yes, of course. There is a book, I think it's just called Git Source Control, that covers a lot of the basics on why you would use source control. The examples in the book are all from the command line. So they don't have any screenshots of how to do this in SourceTree or with TortoiseGit and that sort of thing. All the tools are, all the screenshots, if you will, they're all how to write the command lines to do this sort of work. The nice thing about that is it works on any platform. The commands are all the same. whereas a tool like TortoiseGit only works on Windows. The other nice thing, though, is there's a PDF copy of that book that's totally free to download. So you don't even have to spend any money to check out this book. You can grab it and read about all the concepts. And even though the examples are all command line in there, all of the text, it's not a command, things where it explains why you would do a commit and why you would have a branch and when you should merge things, that's all written in a pretty easy to understand format, and that information is all correct whether you're using a GUI or command line or some combination of the two. So, yeah, that book is really worth checking out. I can't think of the exact link off the top of my head. I know I have a link to it though in my slide deck. So I'll
we'll put a link to the slides. Yeah, we'll put a link to your slide deck in the show notes so everyone can get to your slides, and we'll put a link to the book in the show notes too. Okay. So what other places would be good to learn about Git?
Other places to learn about Git. I feel like you're setting me up for something that I'm not remembering to say. I would recommend the book. I would recommend making your own sort of app.
Yeah, yes. I mean, Tim Cunningham, you mentioned, had some.
Oh, right, yes. Yeah, Tim Cunningham has, sorry, Tim, I completely spaced on that example. Yeah, Tim Cunningham, he's given a couple of great talks on Git and version control. I believe a couple of those have been recorded. You can check those out on YouTube. I would just check out Tim Cunningham. He also gave a talk on the CF Hour podcast quite a while ago. And just explained a lot of basic concepts of using Git source control in there that were really good. I believe his website is cfmumbojumbo.com, and there are a couple of really good articles on there as well that talk about some different ways Tim and his team have implemented Git for different projects over the years.
Yeah, that's CFR episode 118 for those who want to track it down. And then what about courses? Any courses on using Git?
Courses on using Git. You know what? I had to shut my other window down because we had the bandwidth issues earlier, so I don't have my notes in front of me at the moment.
I think Pete Bell may have done something.
Peter Bell's got a good. He's got a good Git class that he's taught as well. That gets really high recommendations. You can check out Peter Bell. He's on Twitter all the time. He's constantly giving meetups and classes all across the U.S. and Europe, and on not just Git but on other various tech options out there in the world and what those do. Peter is a former or a longtime ColdFusion person as well too, so that's kind of where I got his name from. Really good guy.
All right. Anything else you want to tell us about Git before we switch to a slightly related topic?
I don't think so. I would say just start small. If someone wants to try it out, make a little test app. Make a web page with 5 .html files that just keeps track of your favorite baseball team or the last concerts you went to or something simple like that, and just kind of go over the concepts of, can I make a branch? Can I check the files in and out? Can I talk to the GitHub server correctly? Just start small with something like that, and don't be afraid to use it on as many things as you want. There's no wasted hard drive space to worry about. It doesn't take up a lot of extra room. It works really, really quickly. And if nothing else, it really will make you just breathe easier when you're making changes to your code and you think, oh man, I accidentally deleted that chunk of code last week. I really need it now. I wish I could remember what that code looked like. Well, now you have a really easy way to tell what that code looks like and just grab it again and add it to your app. So yeah, don't be afraid to start using it. You don't have to go through all the big best practice hoops right off the bat. Start small and add new features and streamline your workflow as you can moving forward.
I sort of feel we should get Nancy Reagan to do a thing like, here's your code without source control, and here's your code with source control. And it really makes a big difference. So everyone listening, please use some kind of source control. And Git's a great option for various reasons that we discussed earlier. So let me just ask you now something I'm asking all my guests, and just see what the answer that comes to you today is, which is, why are you proud to use ColdFusion?
I like using ColdFusion because I'm a consultant, and often clients call me up to solve a problem. They'll say, we want to build a web app that does X, Y, and Z things. What do you recommend we use to get that work done as quickly as possible in a safe way that's going to work for us long term? What do you recommend for the technology stack, Nolan? And being as objective as I can, ColdFusion just tends to be the right answer a lot of the time. I get more done per line of code out of the box with CFML than I do pretty much any other technology stack. There are occasional exceptions. If I'm talking to a very Microsoft-centric outfit, I might recommend some sort of .NET solution. But for 99% of the web apps out there that get sent my way, CFML is just the way to go. I get so much more done with it. I'm more productive. It just works. So that's usually why I recommend it.
So what would it take to make ColdFusion even more alive this year?
I think the language itself is moving in really good directions. The Lucy folks have done a great job of adding new features into CFML that we see in other stacks. The Adobe flavor of ColdFusion is adding those. They're kind of playing a little bit of catch up, but they're adding those features as well. And so it's getting to be really good in that regard. I think the biggest thing is there's the perception kind of from the outside world, people who hear of ColdFusion, but they don't deal with it on a day-to-day basis. They often think, oh, I thought that was a dead product that died 10, 15 years ago. So they've never used it before and they think it's gone. Or they used it once back in 1999 and think it hasn't changed any since then. So really, I think the best thing we could do moving forward is sort of work together to dispel those rumors, build more great cutting edge and eye-catching applications with it. I really like the work that folks like Order Solutions are doing with CommandBox and tools like that that show that all the stuff people are excited about in other stacks like Node, we have those exact same sorts of tools and options here in the CFML space too. So I want to see more of that moving forward. I think that'll help quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is a call to arms for every CF listening to write ColdFusion the modern way and use tools like Git and CommandBox and other tools, Docker, and we can and then tell people all the cool stuff you're doing in ColdFusion.
Yeah, absolutely. Make GitHub accounts and share your projects on GitHub. Make them public repositories so other people can see your code and they can be inspired by what you're working on and they can learn new things too. I think a lot of people think they won't make a GitHub or they won't make a public source control project because they're afraid people are going to judge them on the quality of their code or they're going to get mocked for, oh, you built it that way? I would never build something that way. Why did you use that function call? That's stupid. I've got several repositories out there with basically tiny little demos of how to do things in JavaScript or how to do things in CFML that are just there for people to learn from if they need an example of how to do something they've never tried before. And I can tell you, I've never had anybody email me and say, that's a stupid idea. Why do you have such a simple thing on GitHub? No one's going to need that. The only responses I get from having my code out there are people saying thank you or people clicking the star icon to rate the content or mark it as a favorite. I think the biggest rumor that's false is that people will just judge all of your code and shun you for writing quote unquote bad code and that sort of thing if you make a GitHub account and share something publicly. There are people that will do that. Those people are not supported and promoted by others, so that mentality sort of does get removed, pretty quickly. And I've never had any problem with that kind of thing. I would say, yeah, make repositories for small, medium, and large projects. Make repositories on GitHub for your beginning apps, your medium-sized apps. When you're just trying out some new thing and it only takes you 10 lines of code, throw it in a repository, because you know what? There's some other person somewhere else in the world that is going to look at those 10 lines of code and go, oh, that's how I do such and such thing. I couldn't remember how to do that. I'm going to take Nolan's 10 lines and add those to the 12 lines of code I found from Michael's repository last week. And now I've got a really great idea I can build from. And it really can work that way.
Cool. So congratulations on speaking at CF Camp. What are you looking forward to at the event?
I'm looking forward to doing a lot of networking. There are several people I write code with on different projects that live in Europe, and I don't get to see them very often except at the conferences. So I'm looking forward to seeing Mark Drew and Matt Gifford, hanging out with them a little bit. The Preside platform is always very well showcased at CF Camp, and I don't get a chance to spend a lot of time looking at Preside on my day-to-day business. So I'm looking forward to the Preside showcasing that's going to happen over there, so I can check out that CMS a little bit more in detail, and of course just saying hi to everyone else over in Europe too, and all of the other speakers.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for coming on the CF Alive podcast today.
Thanks for having me.